In today's world, people feel lost in a sea of ideas. Which ones should we accept? Stay tuned because you're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. Here is your host, Kurt Jarris.
Well, a good day to you, and thanks for joining us here on another episode of Veracity Hill, where we are striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. Very nice to be with you here in the offices in downtown West Chicago of Defenders Media. And we are pleased to come at you another week here with content. And we're going to be talking about students again. If you haven't had the chance to listen to last week's episode, we were talking about Christian study centers and how a growing movement of people are interested in raising the playing field for Christians in academia, specifically at non-Christian institutions, secular institutions, showing faculty, graduate students, and undergraduate students how it is that we can be disciples of Jesus with our minds. And so it was a very fun episode. Had a wonderful chance to speak with Drew Trotter, who's overseeing that organization. And so here we are. We're going to be talking about younger people this time on today's program, thinking about ways in which we can engage with them where they're at and to communicate these difficult high-level issues. And we'll be thinking about some concerns about this, some topics, issues. How do we share our beliefs with young folks? And so on today's program, I've invited Elizabeth Urbanowicz, who is the director or founder, creator of Foundation Comparative Worldview Curriculum. And she has had a number of years of experience in the Christian education sector. And so she's put together this wonderful curriculum that she feels has filled a need for Christian students who are raised in the church, raised in Christian homes, and even go to a Christian school, but who were nevertheless still thinking in worldly ways and worldly thinking methods and models. So she thought, hey, how can we help students learn to critically engage every idea they encounter? And so she's created this wonderful curriculum. So you can go to foundationworldview.com. But joining me in studio is Elizabeth Urbanowicz. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Kurt.
Now, just to be clear, and I'm not sure if I've ever asked you this, so your last name, am I saying that correctly?
You did a good job, Urbanowicz.
Okay, great. Just
easy.
Making sure I know. Yeah, same with Jarris. Last name's not always the easiest. All right, so tell me, I know I sort of teased a little bit about your thinking and your journey here, but tell me a little bit about yourself and how you came along to going into the Christian education sector, and then the journey that led you to create the Foundation curriculum.
Yes, so I always knew that I wanted to be a teacher. I just love learning. I love exploring. I love helping others. Just really get excited about truth. I never had plans to enter into Christian education. Actually, when I was in college, I was an elementary education and Spanish double major. I wanted to work in the inner city in a more ESL environment, but I ended up working at a private Christian school and loved that. Didn't think I was going to love that, but ended up loving that. And several years into my teaching experience, I noticed a problem, kind of as you alluded to before, that the kids in my classroom, they came from great Christian homes. I was the one teaching them all day, so I knew they were getting a biblically based education. Most of them were fairly involved in church, but they were just rapidly absorbing these ideas from the culture. And so I took a step back to think, what is going on? Like why aren't we turning out kids who understand why Christianity is true and really just have this robust faith, but are kind of like a little bit of Christianity here, a little bit of naturalism here, postmodern view of truth. And so I started looking for just resources I could use with my students to get them critically thinking through the big questions that every worldview has to answer. And at the time, I couldn't find anything that went any lower than high school. And I thought, man, if my third graders are already just mixing in all of these different ideas and kind of taking a buffet approach to worldview, by the time they're in high school, we're going to have some serious issues. And so that's what led me to start doing more research and seeing there wasn't anything out there. So then creating materials for the students that were in my classroom.
So what would be like an example of how you would see for third graders these non-Christian themes or motifs, philosophies entering their thinking?
Well, just a really easy example is one time I was in the middle of teaching a lesson and was using like a smart board, and the projector went on the fritz. And so all I did was I turned around to just fiddle with some of the wires and figure out what was going on. And one of the kids in my class was like, "Guys, this is super stressful. We should totally meditate to calm down." All I did was turn around, and the whole class is sitting like cross-legged with their fingers out going, and I was like, what in the world is going on?
Yeah.
And so I paused and I was like, hey guys, let's talk about this whole term meditate and what it means. And we talked about it, and it was as if I was speaking a foreign language to them. I was explaining this doesn't have its roots in reality. It has its roots. I explained it in simpler terms than Eastern mysticism. But just these blank stares, it had never occurred to them that there are different beliefs that are present, and that we have a responsibility of actually looking at what is true and evaluating that. So there was tons of different examples like that, but that was just a more funny one because I literally turned around and then I turned back around and my whole class is like Kung Fu Panda meditating.
Right.
I was like, what in the world?
So they're certainly getting these ideas from, say entertainment or watching the culture, and then sharing those ideas with one another. And so, the question is, how can we help address these issues? Now, one of the things that comes to my mind in thinking about how we are to engage young ones, I'm thinking, well, what are non-believers going to think about when we want to train students? They're going to say, oh, that's indoctrination. So where is that line between maybe what we might think is, a form of indoctrination? Because, of course, we as evangelicals think, oh, yeah, they're indoctrinating people with these bad ideas, So what can help us distinguish between indoctrination and, say, teaching and training, and have that be, valid?
I think two key things that we have to look for. First, we are indoctrinating if all we do is present our kids with what we believe is true. If we never give them, any exposure to anything outside of the Christian worldview, which that's impossible. But if in our instruction of them, we never actually give them an opportunity to consider different perspectives, then we are just presenting them with one perspective, and that would be indoctrinating them, just telling them this is what's true, believe it.
Yeah.
And then the second thing would be if we give them other perspectives, but we're setting up straw men, and we're saying, oh, look at how ridiculous this perspective is because of that. Then again, we're indoctrinating them because we're just saying, Christianity wins, end of story, without actually training them to critically think. Where if we take a step back and actually start asking questions and require that the kids in our care are able to develop a defense for them, that's different than just saying, here's the truth, believe it, or here's the truth, look at what isn't the truth, ha ha ha, we win.
Right. So they are acquiring tools to think critically. We're not just saying, oh, you just have to believe Jesus existed, is the Lord, read the Bible, wholesale, and then keeping all other ideas out of the picture. Whereas you're saying, hey, no, let's look at these ideas together. And that's what you do in your curriculum. You talk about these worldviews, and you question some of these positions, and you do so in a way that, you make it easy for, a young child to understand.
Right.
So you started this journey. How many years did you teach in Christian education?
So I taught for a total of 10 years, and it was at year 5 that I started on this journey.
I see. So it took you a few years to write the whole curriculum. And
So around year 3, I noticed the problem and was like, what is going on? Year 5, I started looking like, okay, what can I do about it? And then I had developed the curriculum for my students around year 7, and that's when other people started coming after me and were like, how can we get our hands on this? And I was like, you can't. I'm a 3rd grade teacher. I'm not a publisher. But after several years of those requests, I was like, okay, clearly there's something here, and there's a need if I'm not going out and seeking out people, but they're coming to me. So that's when I stepped back from teaching to publish. And
if I can say this modestly, from what I've seen, it sort of exploded, the interest in your curriculum, such that now it's your full-time job. So you no longer teach because you've been so busy working on the curriculum and speaking places to sort of showcase it and demonstrate it for folks. So what would be like an example lesson Why is it that, say, if there are parents that are watching today's program, what should get them interested in why they should bring it to their homeschool student or their Christian school?
Right. Well, really, the philosophy that we take is the first thing, anytime we examine a question that a worldview has to answer, the first thing we do is just look at the question. Like, what is this question? What does it mean when we ask this question? Why is this question important? And then we have the kids actually explore what clues do we find in life and the world around us. So we're just having them explore, getting them to critically think. Then after that, that's when we expose them to, okay, what does the Bible say about this? What does the Bible teach about this topic? What do other competing worldviews in our society teach? And then have the kids really compare and contrast the beliefs and evaluate where does the evidence lead. Because a lot of times what we do is we'll just gather up all the evidence that we can muster for Christianity, and shove it at the kids. But then, one day, first of all, we're not equipping them to critically think. We're just giving them evidence and they don't really even know what to do with it. But then when they hear someone present an alternative case, who's gathered up their own evidence, then they're just like, okay, which pile do I go with, without actually being equipped to think, okay, what evidence do I actually find in the world around me, and which worldview comprehensively explains it the best? So an example of this would be in Unit 3 of Foundation. We explore the question, how did life begin? And we break it down really simply because we want even 8-year-olds to be able to get this. So first off, we just look at the question, what does it mean for something to be alive? And we explore that and come to the conclusion like, okay, living things contain information. And then we look at what does information point us to, and we have the kids explore just around this room, where are things that contain information? And we have them look at, do those things come accidentally? Do they come purposefully? Can it be a combination of the two? And then after that, we look at different theories of origin and say, okay, which theory of the origin of life actually best explains what we find in the world around us, so that they're coming to that conclusion. We're not just like, the Bible tells us God created life, here's some evidence for this. We kind of take a different approach so that they're building confidence in that. And we make sure that it's all very hands-on and taking abstract concepts and attaching them to something concrete so that, an 8, 9, 10-year-old can understand these things.
It's, you ask a question, what does it mean for something to be alive? And for us, it's all kind of intuitive. Yeah, we know what that means, but maybe that's because we take those things for granted. Mm-hmm. And so thinking about the concept of truth, mm-hmm. For example, maybe many of us take that for granted and we don't recognize when the bad ideas enter into that. So then all of a sudden we start to say things like, well, that's true for you, but not for me, or sharing your truth. And if I had to Oprah was sort of famous for saying that, sharing your truth. If I had to understand her charitably, and I don't even know if she meant it this way, but it would be like sharing your perspective on mm-hmm. truth. But still, that would be an improper use of the term truth, as if it's this relative thing.
Right, and that's actually one of the things that people who have used Foundation have found most surprising, in that, we just use this term truth, and most 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds, their understanding of truth doesn't go beyond the concept of, I need to tell the truth. But we don't actually talk about, well, what does that actually mean? And so in the 5th lesson, in the first unit of Foundation, the question that we explore is the truth true for everyone? And the first activity we have them do is we'll tell the teacher or the parent to, hold up a poster that says yes on one side and, tape that to the wall, and then a poster that says no on one side and tape it to the wall. And the kids are then asked the question, is the truth true for everyone? How do you know? And the kids have to justify their answer on a sticky note and then go place it on the wall. And most teachers, parents, church leaders are expecting that it's going to be really clear that the kids are going to say yes, where the majority of the kids say no.
Wow.
And then they place their sticky note on the no side. And I get emails, all the time from parents and church leaders and teachers saying, I had no idea that here I am teaching, however many days a week, that the Bible is true. And my kids are thinking, yeah, that's true for us, but it's not true for everyone. And so then we go through a lesson and we look at the difference between objective truth claims versus subjective truth claims, that are based on personal preference. We have them go through a couple different activities, fun things with cookies and other things. Then at the end, we ask them the same question, and they have to take another sticky note and respond yes or no and justify their answer. And most of the time, then the teachers and parents and church leaders are hugely relieved.
Yeah, they finally
that
get it.
Almost everyone, has transferred to the yes side with solid justification for explaining how they know that something that's true is going to be true for everyone, whether or not that person understands it.
When you have the students write on the sticky note what their justification is or rationale, what are, I don't know if you've done it yourself when you were a teacher, but what are some of those reasons why young people would say truth is, relative?
So usually in the beginning when they're, when they're saying the truth isn't true for everybody, they'll just say well, something could be true for you, but not true for me, or different people believe different things, or not everybody believes the same thing.
The problem of religious pluralism.
Yes, and that's what we have to get into. That's really why we really hit on objective truth claims versus subjective truth claims. Because looking at, if somebody says God doesn't exist, that's not subjective, because a lot of times people get confused and they think that subjective just means it's false. It's no, subjective, there is no true or false. It's just your personal preference. If I say that cookie dough ice cream is the best flavor, there's no point in arguing, because for me it is, and for you it's going to be something different, It's not a right or wrong. So a lot of times even giving the kids an example of something they know that's false, saying, the earth is flat, even though there are people that would argue with that. That's the reason why there's an argument, because either the earth is flat or it's not. It's not poof, it pops into being a globe, when I believe it's a globe. So a lot of times the kids just have bought into that, it's different people believe different things. But once we give them those categories of objective versus subjective, they understand, oh, my preference about something can be different, but the truth about what that thing is or was designed to do doesn't change. An example we use is we'll give them a cookie, and we'll have them in a group come up with a list of subjective truth claims about this cookie, it's gross, it's too sweet, it's delicious. And then we have them write down a list of objective truth claims. I can believe with my whole heart that there are no chocolate chips in that cookie, but if it's a chocolate chip cookie, my belief, no matter the sincerity of my belief, the chocolate chips aren't going to disappear because of my belief. And just attaching it to something concrete really, really helps them.
Yeah. So talking about the nature of truth really helps them to understand that. That's fascinating. Are there, while you were creating the curriculum and maybe testing it out, were there lessons that you realized were just kind of too challenging for the age range? And what sort of is the target market for you on the curriculum?
Well, our target audience is 8 to 12-year-olds, really starting in 3rd grade. But we say you have to know the developmental level of your kids. Some 8-year-olds are younger, and they're not going to be ready for this until they're 10. Where, there could be a 7-year-old that's ready for this. Just a couple things that I learned the hard way. With where kids are developmentally, emotionally, to prepare them for some things. Like the first time I created the first lesson just on what is truth, in teaching them the correspondence theory of truth. We don't say truth is that which corresponds to reality. We summarize it as truth is what is real. Send them on a treasure hunt where some of the directions for the treasure are real directions. They are true directions. They align with reality. And some of the directions do not align with reality. They're not true directions. And the first time I did this lesson, I was so excited about it. But I didn't preface it by saying, some of these directions might be true directions and some of them might not be true. I just said, here are the directions to the treasure. And then, one group finds it and the other 20 kids don't. And I'm trying to teach this deep truth, and everybody's crying. And I'm like, I didn't get the candy. And I was like, okay, lesson learned. I have to prepare them emotionally for what's about to take place. But most concepts, there's things that are might not be appropriate to expose kids to. So we want to make sure we're being developmentally appropriate there. But most things that are abstract, if you can attach them to something concrete, kids are able to get it. Think about addition in mathematics. You know, like when you have like a 5-year-old, unless they're incredibly bright, you know, you're not like, tell me 7 plus 4. That's a meaningless phrase to them, 7 plus 4. So what do we do with a 5-year-old? We give them blocks. And we teach them to count. And then once we teach them to count, we attach a symbol to it, and we write out 7, we write out 4. So then they can see it symbolically. And then, you know, we push the blocks together, we have them count, and then we show it symbolically. By the time they're 8, 9, you can say 7 plus 4, and they say 11. And so it's the same way with kids with philosophical ideas. You know, like we're not just going to sit down and lecture on the correspondence theory of truth, but if we can break it down and we can attach it to something concrete, like those directions were true directions that led you to the chocolate, or those directions were not true directions and you didn't get to the chocolate, and then we can move it to something that is abstract. It's just much easier for them to understand.
Now, when you go to conferences to promote, do you lead teachers and others through, like, sort of, you demonstrate how to give the lesson and talk about the experience, and what's the reception there that people have?
Well, usually when I'm speaking, I'm not just trying to sell. I mean, I do want people to use the materials because I think it will equip them, but I'm also trying to give them, you know, 1 or 2 tools that they can use, you know, even without me and without foundation. But in general, the response has been like, oh, this makes so much sense that I've never actually thought to take a step back and to think, how can I do this? Because even just with the example of truth, it's something we talk about all the time. And, you know, in apologetic circles, we talk about it a lot more. But just in general, even in evangelical culture, there's not a lot of talk that goes like below the surface of like, what do we mean when we're talking about truth? I was just talking to an adult recently who said they were talking in their Sunday school class about truth, and not one adult in the Sunday school class could provide a definition for it. And this adult, you know, contacted me because their child went through foundation, and so she went home and then asked her son, how would you define truth? And he's like, truth is what's real. It's what shows us how things really are, you know. And it's because a lot of times, you know, as adults, we haven't taken the time to step back and really think through, what does this mean? So I think as I've been equipping other adults, even though my background is in apologetics, I don't so much speak in the world of apologetics because I'm more of a translator. So, you know, I'm just speaking in the Christian community at large and giving adults the opportunity to step back and think, like, what does this mean? How does this apply to reality? And then how can I equip the kids that God has placed in my care to understand this as well?
It's fascinating because some atheists, especially naturalists, they wouldn't have a problem with understanding the truth concept because they're very science-oriented. Science is based on observing the natural order, and so they understand this concept of the correspondence theory of truth. It seems like the philosophies are coming from, you know, postmodernism, relativism, other issues that are just so pervasive in our culture. I do want to track back. We're going to take our break here, but I do want to track back to the idea of development and talking about LGBTQ issues. I'll explain a little bit about sort of my interest in that through my experience with the West Chicago Public Library Board. And so talking about how we see young people dealing with that in the public schools and how your curriculum maybe addresses that. So we'll take a break here, but when we come back, we've got a round of What's Behind Kurt. We'll do rapid questions with Elizabeth and continue our discussion then, talking about Foundation Comparative Worldview curriculum. So stick with us through this short break from our sponsors.
You're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
Evangelical Christians are talking about hell. What if we believe what we believe because we've always believed it? What if the gospel is really a matter of life and death? We want you to open your mind, open your Bible, and rethink hell. At rethinkinghell.com, evangelicals look at what the Bible says about hell, putting conventional and controversial views to the test.
Let's say there's this Christian apologist. You love their message, but have trouble finding their videos, their articles, or social media posts. How do you stay connected to them? We're on it. Defenders Media uses the tools of the digital age to create content for your favorite apologists. We give them more screen time, more digital soapboxes, and more presence to deliver more of the content that you love. That's what we do.
I know that social media is important to those of you who follow my work. Many respond to my videos and posts on Facebook and Twitter, but it becomes impossible after a while to keep up with it all and to continue with research. That's why I'm thrilled that we have found a solution, Defenders Media.
Whether it's a website, whether it's printed material, whether it's a question on graphics, I cannot do what I do and reach my audience without the help of Defenders Media. They have been integral in helping me to reach my audience.
Defenders Media ensures consistent content reaches your hand from today's leading apologists and apologetic ministries, like Mike Lycona, Apologetics 315, the Veracity Hill podcast with Kurt Jarris, and more.
To learn more, text the word Defenders to 555-888, and we'll send you a free PDF of the top 5 ways to share the gospel online. Thanks for sticking with us through that short break from our sponsors. If you'd like to learn how you can become a sponsor, you can go to our website, veracityhill.com, click on that patron tab where you can learn about the different sponsorship levels. Or if you just want to become one of our patrons, that would be wonderful. Those are people that just chip in a few bucks each month, $5, $10, or $20 a month to help keep us going and growing here at Veracity Hill. This is episode 175, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, 175, I've been told. It's confirmed. We've been providing new content every week now for over 3 years. And I was just telling Chris before we went live today that this is so fun doing a program, producing this. So if you enjoy this program, if it's beneficial to you, if you found that it's beneficial to others, because I know you're sharing these episodes with others, please do consider becoming one of our supporters. On today's episode, we're talking about youth worldview development, and we're joined in studio by Elizabeth Urbanowicz. She is the creator of Foundation Comparative Worldview Curriculum. But before we get back to that conversation, we've started just a few weeks ago doing a segment on the show called What's Behind Kurt? And I've exited out here, so I can't see anything here on the stream. Last week, so 2 weeks ago, was Aragorn from Lord of the Rings. And last week, it was Tim the Toolman Taylor. Now, Chris, I had a question for you. I was thinking about this. And there are people that are submitting the objects, people, person, place, thing, whatever, to be behind me. Are they telling you what the answer is? Because what if the answer was Tim Allen, the actor, and not Tim Taylor from Home Improvement?
In that particular email, it was definitely Tim the Toolman Taylor.
It was, okay.
Clarified that they wanted
Okay, well, I was just curious to make sure if they had or hadn't, because, yeah, if I had guessed Tim the Toolman Taylor and it was, in fact, Tim Allen, I mean, we can get into tricky things. Yeah. So you may just have to follow up with folks if in the future they're submitting things. Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, well, so rules of the game, I'm allowed 12 questions. We might have to modify this rule in the future because I've come so close. I've been like 2 or 3 questions away from getting it. Seriously. So I don't need 20 questions, but 12 might be too short. All right. So, Chris, I assume you've got something behind me now.
I do. Yeah. There is something behind Kurt.
Okay. So, first question, if you're ready.
I am ready.
All right. Is it a person?
No.
Oh, first time. Wow. Okay. Is it a place?
Yes.
Ooh, fun geography. Is this a non-fictional place? AKA a real place, not like Rivendell or something.
Yes.
It's non-fictional. Okay.
Non-fictional.
Ooh. Are you tallying my questions for me?
I am.
Okay.
I am tallying your questions.
Is this on planet Earth?
Yes.
Yes. Is it north of the equator?
Yes.
Is it in North America?
No.
Is it in Europe?
Wait. Modification to last.
Oh.
I think it is in North America.
Oh, okay. So then my Europe question does not count.
Correct, it does not count.
Thank you. All right. Maybe is he confused then? Is this like Hudson Bay up way north in Canada or something. That's not a real question. All right. Is this in the United States?
No.
Is this in Canada?
No.
Is this in Mexico?
No.
You said North America, right?
Yep, you're at 9 questions. You have 3 left.
Oh, man. Now, this is a clarifying question. I'd like to think. When I've asked if it was in North America, that means on land. So.
It is. Well, I can't answer.
Well.
Clarifying question.
Okay, but there are only. Okay. Elizabeth, is the Caribbean considered part of North America?
I
Okay,
don't. I think that's a good question that you're asking,
all
but I
right.
don't know the answer to it.
Is this a landmark? Is it like a giant rock or waterfall? Because like Niagara Falls is kind of both. You know, it's right on the international border.
No.
Man, I'm gonna lose this one.
3 questions left.
I'm gonna lose this one this week, big time. I was so close the last 2 weeks. North America, but it's not in a country that I've named, at least. I don't even know what type of question to ask next to follow up to get me closer. Is it... Oh, gosh. Is it somewhere in the Caribbean?
No.
Chris has too much fun with this, guys. You should see his smiling face.
As he's tallying questions.
I've got a last question. Oh, gosh. North America, but not Canada, not the United States, not Mexico, not the Caribbean. Am I going to laugh at this?
I don't know, honestly.
Okay, this is a good one. Whoever picked it. I have no idea. Is it Defenders Media in downtown West Chicago?
No.
No. All right. Well, what is it?
It's Greenland.
Is that in North America?
Is that North America, though?
Is that?
According to a Google search, the continent it is associated with is North America.
That's so
Is that
interesting.
right?
That's
I
so
never
interesting.
knew that. I guess I thought maybe it was part of the European continent, but even then,
Yeah.
wow. Well done to whomever submitted this one. Well done. You got me.
That's a good one.
Big time. I mean, I was close with Aragon, and I was even closer or close-ish with last week's, but man, I was off. All right, well, we need to have some music or something for this segment, you know.
Yeah, I
What's
could probably
behind-
drum up something.
Yeah, Chris is going to work on that this week. Well, actually, okay, so I'm not going to be here next week. I will be in San Diego, California, missing out on the cold weather, at the annual meeting of the Evangelical Theological Society and Philosophical Society. And Defenders Media will be present at the EPS Apologetics Pop-Level Conference. So I'm hoping to bring some interview either live there or we will get something sent to you from Chris. So we won't be doing this segment next week. But if you want to submit something to place behind me on this green screen here, email Chris at defendersmedia.com. Send him the image, maybe a little description, help him out exactly what the answer is, just to make sure we're clear. Very good, whomever sent that. Can you tell me who is it?
It was me.
Chris came up with that one. Dang. Wow, how about that? What a trickster. What a trickster. All right, moving along. Elizabeth, let's do a shorter segment. We do this with our first-time guests. It's called Rapid Questions, where we're going to ask you some short questions. We're looking for quick answers.
Okay.
And we get to learn more about you. It has absolutely nothing to do about today's topic discussion. So if you are ready, I will start the game clock.
Okay, ready.
Okay. KFC or Taco Bell?
Neither.
Ooh. What's your clothing store of choice?
Express.
Have you ever driven on the other side of the road?
Only in the UK.
Morning person or night owl?
Morning person.
What is your one phobia?
Ooh. Let's say spiders.
Favorite pizza topping?
Bacon.
If you could time travel, would you go backwards or forwards?
Backward.
What's your favorite smell? I think Mark came up with that.
Favorite smell? Let's go with candles.
Okay, favorite superhero?
Oh, this is horrible. I don't know anything about superheroes. We're going to nix that one.
What kind of music is playing on your radio?
Andrew Peterson.
What occupation would you never attempt?
Garbage woman.
Pick a fictional character you'd like to meet.
Ooh. This is a hard one. Sorry. Go to the next question.
Do you have a hidden talent? And if so, what is it?
I can sing my name to the alphabet song because it's 26 letters. And it ends in Z.
Guys, I think we need a demonstration. Demonstration?
Okay, sure. I haven't done this in a very long
26
time.
letters.
Let's
That's
hope
a lot of letters in a name.
Let's hope I can remember how to spell it correctly.
Okay, the
so-
tune goes. Da, 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 da.
Thanks, Kurt. Okay, so let's go with ELIZABETHRACHAELURBANOWICZ. Now I know my ABCs. Next time, won't you sing with me?
Wow, that's impressive. Did I catch a middle name in there as well? Or?
Yeah, it's Rachel.
Oh.
Yes.
Wow,
Yeah.
26 letters.
Yes, I'm praying that if I get married one day, God will send a tall man with a very short last name.
Short last name.
Short last name would be awesome.
That's with Z.
That
So
is a
that's
Z,
a
so you
Z.
can still. Yeah, right. Good. All right, I want to follow up on a fictional character you'd like to meet. This is always a fun question.
Oh, okay.
We
so
get
do
get
that.
fun answers to that. So you took a
Fictional
pass.
character. I know, I'm sorry. It was just a rapid fire thing. I was like,
Right.
I can't think quick enough. So I'm trying to think. I think Aragorn would be a really good one.
Does he have a short last name? Oh,
No.
see what I did there?
Does he have a last name
I don't
at
know.
all?
At any rate, okay, Aragorn. Why would you want to meet him?
I just really
King of
appreciate.
Gondor.
Well, I appreciate his character in Lord of the Rings because he has such an awareness of his own weaknesses, which is why he shies away from actually stepping into his rightful place. But he's such a great leader, and yeah, I think he's a great character.
Nice. Good. All right. Let's jump back into our conversation about youth worldview development. And I wanted to pick your brain about the growing interest in movement and having young people learn about human sexuality and especially non-traditional views of sexuality and gender. My interest is a couple years back, and Chris, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I think I've talked about this on the show.
I don't know
Maybe.
if you have. We've talked about it a ton in the office.
Jake says yes over there.
Oh, Jake says yes.
Maybe in, yeah.
I haven't heard about it, so share it.
Okay, well, so what happened at the West Chicago Public Library was there was a book there called something like This Day in June or A Day in June, and it depicts a gay pride parade. And it's a little like animated, cartoonish book, and it's geared towards young people. And so we had discovered this along with my wife had taken the kids there, so we had discovered this book and thought that it should be removed from circulation. Of course, people came out. Word got out, and people just came bashing, just calling us book banners, and like I'm not looking to take the book out of the marketplace entirely, right? Like this is not a communist agenda. I'm just saying, hey, this book shouldn't be in circulation at my library. I don't think that it should be something that young toddlers should even be exposed to. And there was even one panel. It was thicker, like the card type of book. So it's geared towards toddlers. That even had a sadomasochist group depicted wearing the leather outfits. So it's like clearly they're trying to say, hey, this is okay and should be morally praiseworthy. And I vehemently disagree with that. It is not. And this book should not be in my library. I still think that. Of course, the library board decided to turn down our requests. And meanwhile, we're the ones that are depicted as the bigots and whatnot. So, hey, that's life. I'm concerned that in our public schools there is this pushing of not just non-Christian, but what I think is not part of natural law views. It doesn't even line up with reality, especially the transgender issue. It is the opposite. It's a confusion, gender dysphoria of what's happening. So I see it happen in the public schools. You hear about, this is a bad nickname, but tranny time at public libraries, where libraries are bringing in drag queens to come in and read to little kids. One of them in Houston was even a registered sex offender. And you're just like, what is going on with people? It seems like the education is pushing an agenda on those issues. How does this is going to be a very broad question now, all of that said. How does your curriculum deal with that? Especially when we think about the developmental issues of young persons, because you do talk about truth, you talk about the cookie, a treasure hunt. Okay, these are very non-sensitive matters, but when you get into sacred issues like that, how do you raise those issues with young people?
That's a great question. And actually, the fourth unit in Foundation is actually exploring the question, who am I? Or what does it mean to be human? And so we do get into, while we don't directly, address what it means to be lesbian or homosexual or bisexual or transgender, we do get into gender, and is it purposeful? Is it designed? Is it important? Is it something that should matter? And when we're talking with children about this, obviously it depends on who your child is and where you live, at the age when it's appropriate to actually directly address these issues. Like if you're living in a certain city where these agendas are pushed all the time, at 4 or 5 years old, you might have to just explain at a very basic level, what some people believe. The approach we take in Foundation is to actually look at some of the underlying issues behind this. So why is it that our culture has so rapidly got on this transgender agenda? And a lot of it has to do with just this, just postmodernism and how, rampant the ideas are in our culture. This idea that I define truth by my feelings. And so if I feel, like I am a man, even though I'm in a female body, I must really be a man. And so that's why we start first with this concept of truth and then continue to build up. Because if we can get our kids to understand that reality is not determined by our feelings, then when we bring up a topic like this of okay, someone is a boy, but they feel like they like a lot of the same things that most girls like. Does that liking of that, does that make them a girl? And how do you know why or why not? And it's well, no, if they're a boy and they have a boy's body, they might feel one way, but it's actually reality,
right?
That determines who or what we are. And so actually getting to some of those root issues there, we also just cover some just basic evidence for existence of the soul, which then ties into morality and there being a moral right and wrong for how we use our body. So we take the approach of getting to some of the root issues so that then whoever's working with the kids, the parents or the teachers or the children's ministry workers, then they can figure out the developmental appropriateness of if to take that to the next level and actually directly address what's going on in our culture.
Yeah.
And some of the things when I'm talking, a lot of times when I'll present on this at a teacher's conference or a homeschooling conference or a church conference, like youth workers or high school teachers or middle school teachers will come because they're wondering, okay, at the upper levels, how do I address this? And so the situation you gave, when we're talking about kids, that are 11, 12 years older, on up, these are places where we can directly address those issues, but not just say here's why we believe this is wrong, but to actually ask questions. Because in our society, if you have a complaint like that, you're going to be labeled a bigot or saying you're just people who were believing in segregation in the 60s. To actually step back and ask questions to get our kids thinking. When we say that somebody who is a boy who thinks he's a girl, that he's actually a boy, what are we saying about him? What are we saying about him? Well, we're saying there's a truth about who he is. Are we saying, when we were, when people in the South in the 40s, 50s, 60s were saying that, one bathroom was for black people and one bathroom was for white people, what were they saying? They were saying that these people were of different value. That's what they're saying. When we say that somebody who's a boy feels like he's a girl, we're not saying he's of lesser value. We're not saying he's less human. We're not saying we're better than him. We are saying that there's something true about him that he's not recognizing. And we think that it's actually harmful for him not to recognize that truth, just to help them, to ask questions, to get them thinking along that way. Because, you know, when our kids hear these messages one day, they are going to think, well, maybe I am just a bigot, you know, like me, or maybe my parents are just hateful, maybe I am just supposed to love everybody, which, yes, you should love everybody, but what does it mean to actually love someone? So to actually ask these questions, to get them thinking, so that then they're not just silenced by very loud and illogical rhetoric.
Yeah, right. Okay, so now I'm curious, have you had any messages come from teachers or parents where they've had a child saying that they think they are, a gender that they are not?
I haven't got like any emails from anybody. When I'm at conferences, after I do a session called Preparing Our Children to Navigate the LGBTQ Movement in Truth and Love, there's always a long line of people, who line up to ask me different questions, because this is a huge issue. And so I gave this talk in Denver a couple months ago, and there was 3 moms who were in line right behind each other, and they actually all had the same issue, that they had 5-year-old sons who were coming home telling them that they wanted to be girls. So we actually, talked through that, like, why? Because nowadays, 25 years ago, we would have been like, oh, haha, silly, that's fine if you want to wear a tutu today, you'll be wrestling in the mud tomorrow. But we hear that and we're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And so to actually just, when people come to me, I'm not, like the end-all be-all expert on this. I'm not a child psychologist, but to actually just ask questions, because a lot of times, because of where our culture's at, our automatic mode that we go into is freak out mode. And how can I stop this? How can I figure this out? It's like, well, let's pause. What is your son really saying? Is he really saying that he wants to be a girl? Is he more creative? Does he really like color? And it just happens to be that, girls' clothing is more colorful. What are some ways we can help him express his creativity and, love for color as a boy? Let's take a step back and actually evaluate this rather than freaking out.
Yeah, that's fascinating, looking at the underlying issues. And yeah, you're right. A lot of people they immediately have the red flags, especially in today's society, and they just freak out and they want to put an end to it. And then that almost might make the problem worse, because then the young person might not feel like they are loved in the way that they want to be loved. So that can create all sorts of problems further on down the line. Now, your curriculum is available for Christian schools and homeschoolers. And is it something that a Sunday school teacher might consider doing like throughout a year? How might that work?
Yes, we have a number of churches that use Foundation. And so the way that it's designed is to be implemented once a week. So it fits in really well with a church, calendar year and schedule. The only thing that's a little bit different, just that sometimes is a little bit of a paradigm shift for churches, is we are really having the kids think. And a lot of times kids Sunday school or kids ministry curriculums, it'll have an overarching big idea, and you'll tell the kids a story, have them play a game, or a craft, and then a snack, and then that's it. There's nothing wrong with, games and crafts and snacks, but if our kids are being exposed to other content, for in an education setting, 40 plus hours a week, and then on tablets and other devices, for 40 plus hours a week, we can't really expect to make a huge difference if in the 1 hour a week we have with them, we're asking them to glue cotton balls on sheep. We really have to get them thinking. So this is not meant to be a criticism, but just thinking through. That's been a little bit of a paradigm shift for some of the churches who have used this, that they really want to equip their kids, but their kids aren't necessarily used to that. I found this out when I was teaching children's church at a local church I was attending, and one of the boys who was in the class that I would teach every couple of weeks, he saw me in the coffee area and he was like, "Oh no, it's you!" And I was like, "Oh, it's good to see you too, Samuel. Why are you so excited to see me?" He's like, "Seeing you means you're probably our teacher, and I hate it when you're our teacher." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, why?" And he's like, "Because whenever I go to Sunday school, I just say Jesus as the answer to everything, and you don't let me do that." He's like, "Every time I say Jesus, you make me explain why, and you make me not just say Jesus and say an answer that I really think about. You're not supposed to think in church. That's what school is for." And I said, well, Samuel, that's like the hugest compliment a child's ever given me. But I thought, how sad. And, most 8-year-olds aren't articulate enough to say, church isn't this place you're supposed to think that's what school is for. But that's something that we really want, is as churches implement foundation, that we're going to be causing hopefully a paradigm shift of really bringing sound instructional strategies to the children's church or Sunday school hour and really transforming the way that kids are thinking.
Yeah, it really is disappointing. Yeah, you're not supposed to think at church.
Yeah.
You talked about adding cotton balls, to make a sheep. I think like the story of the flood and Noah's Ark and how we just make it this lovey-dovey thing. And it's like, no, God's actually punishing all of humanity for what they've done and how they've acted. But let's, have like the rainbows and glitter and...
Yes, actually, it was horrible. A couple of years ago, I was at a friend's baby shower, and I was sitting next to her, like writing down who the gifts were from. And this huge Noah's Ark bag came, and she was opening it up, and I leaned over, and I was like, you do realize that's a story of God's judgment, and there are thousands of dead people floating underneath that ark. I was like, please don't hang this. Please don't frame the bag. And I was like, oh, probably shouldn't have said that, but it's what we do, We make these cutesy little things and don't have the kids think, and that's a big reason why we're losing them.
Yep. What's on the horizon for you in developing, foundation curriculum? What's up next for you?
Yeah, so it's an exciting time because we've completed 1 full year. We're about 1.5 years into this. We've got lots of great feedback from our customers, are finding out different things that they're needing, just to be equipped really well. So this coming year, we're going to update Foundation, and for schools, for their subscriptions, we're going to be including more information about cross-curricular connections and how can we, tie this into math and science and social studies and literature. For churches, we are providing instructionally sound games that they can incorporate that are really going to get the kids thinking.
No bad directions leading kids to dead ends. And
Yes, and for individual families, we're coming up with a family devotional that can be used just on a weekly basis. And then stay tuned, because we're going to be coming up with our 2nd year of content so that we can have the first year of foundation, and then after kids have graduated out of that, another year that's going to continue them on this journey of developing sound methods of thinking and evaluating ideas.
And so how long does it take for and I guess it could be at their own pace, somewhat, but say in a Christian school, does your curriculum last 1 school year, or does it go into multiple years?
Schools can be flexible in the way that they implement it, and we specifically designed it so that it could be flexible, because we know that Christian schools have a lot of material to cover because they have all the same subjects as public schools, plus they also usually have a Bible time.
Right.
So they're very limited on their time. And so most schools choose to implement it 1 year. The majority of the schools we have implement it in 5th grade, but some in 4th or 3rd or 6th. And so if they implement it once a week, it will take 34 weeks to get through, which is, you have 40 weeks in a school year, so just give or take, a few weeks there. It takes about 1 school year to get through. However, there's some schools that say we can't devote, 40 minutes once a week to do that. That's too much time. So then what they'll do is they'll break it up over the years. Like they might have 4th grade cover units 1 and 2, and 5th grade covers units 3, 4, and 5. Or we actually have one school that splits it up among 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade.
Oh, wow. Over 3 years, yeah. So then once you're done with that curriculum, then your future second curriculum, I don't want to call it second version, but next level will be coming out. That'll be exciting.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Good, great. Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming into the studio and joining us on our program today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been great.
Yeah. All right, well, that does it for our program today. Like I mentioned, next week I will be hopefully doing some interview with some scholar at ETS. I haven't decided yet. But when you go to this type of conference, this annual event, there are so many different topics, so many different speakers. It's really, you can't pick them all. I mean, literally, there's like thousands of people. So I'll have something for you next week, joined by someone who's thought about these worldview issues. I'm grateful for the support of the patrons that we have, folks that just chip in a few bucks each month. Please consider becoming one of our monthly supporters. And also, if you haven't yet, please give us a review on iTunes or the Google Play Store or our Facebook page. That's one of the ways that people find out about us. And we are cranking out the YouTube videos. Chris is putting up all the old episodes there on that channel. So please go over to our YouTube channel, Veracity Hill, click the subscribe icon, and do they do the bell notification thing? So it gets like...
I think so. You can choose to have subscribe and then ring that bell.
Right, so it's an extra alert, I guess. Something like that.
Lets you know exactly when something's been posted.
Nice. Good. So please be sure to do that. I'm also grateful for the partnerships that we have with our sponsors. They are Defenders Media, Consult Kevin, The Sky Floor, Rethinking Hell, the Illinois Family Institute, and Fox Restoration. I want to thank our technical producer, Chris, for all the fine work that he does week in and week out. And for our in-studio guest, Elizabeth Urbanowicz. You can check out her curriculum at foundationworldview.com. And last but certainly not least, I want to thank you for listening in and for striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
You've been listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. This is a listener-supported program. For more resources, including past shows, visit veracityhill.com.